Everything changed the day science confirmed our planet was dying from the inside out. At first, the experts predicted a slow transition, giving humanity decades, maybe centuries, to adapt. But the forecasts were wrong. Within 2 years, global temperatures plummeted, driving the population toward shrinking regions of livable warmth. Ancient fault lines, once seen as harbingers of destruction, became beacons of hope, as lava flows offered the only reliable source of heat. Nations, powerless to reverse the cooling of Earth's core, dissolved into scattered communities, each one clustering around the few remaining volcanic sites. Here, iron-rich rocks still bubbled with molten life, staving off the frost that thickened day by day across the rest of the planet. In the early days, people believed the crisis would rally us together, yet desperation rarely leads to unity. Our first steps toward the volcanic zones were marked by violence and chaos. Massive convoys clashed on roads thick with black ice, entire families huddled in vehicles that stalled out when the temperature dropped below safe operating levels. Military roadblocks morphed into impromptu camps, piling up with anxious refugees. On news broadcasts, leaders begged for calm, insisting that there was enough geothermal energy if rationed wisely. But no words could soothe a world turning gray and cold beneath a frozen sky. The old divides class, race, wealth, and borders meant nothing in the face of this extinction-level ordeal. Survival became the only currency, each person fighting to secure warmth for themselves and those they loved. I was 12 when my family and I first made the journey. We left behind everything we couldn't carry on our backs. Our battered truck had run out of fuel miles from the outskirts of the first lava flow settlement, so we trudged on foot through a white desert of torpid air. The frigid wind lanced through our coats, biting at unprotected flesh. I can still recall the night we arrived under the flickering glow of an active volcano. Tremors rattled the rock beneath us, while plumes of sulfur rose into the air. It was a hellish landscape, but to me, it felt oddly welcoming. For the first time in days, my numb fingers tingled with the return of sensation. Heat had never been more precious. Living near hot magma had its own perils. Tremors were frequent. The ground quaked, as if warning us that we skirted the edge of annihilation. The temperature difference, frost behind us, boiling death beneath, seemed to compress all existence into a narrow band of habitability. Houses were quickly erected using salvage materials, corrugated metal, steel beams, even reinforced plastic scraps. Every settlement was a ragged tapestry of desperation and invention. In the largest cluster, ironically named Hearth, a precarious system of geothermal vents fed water pipes, allowing rudimentary showers in heated rooms. Scalding steam whistled through the night, rising in columns that froze into icicles far above. We adapted to constant dust and sulfuric fumes, drilling rock for fresh water and bartering meager ration packs. Most days, I helped gather obsidian shards from the cooling lava. We chipped at jagged flows, looking for pieces large enough to serve as makeshift windows or strong enough to craft tools. It was punishing labor. My father, once an accountant, taught me the delicate art of analyzing fractures so we knew where to strike. Feedback from each blow told us whether the lava was still too hot to handle. Often we swathed our hands in old cloth to avoid blistering. The whiff of singed cloth was never far from our noses. The harsh environment demanded constant vigilance. A single misstep, and you could tumble into a patch of scorching ground or slip on a slick of black ice mere meters away. But at least we were alive, safe from the sub-zero wasteland that threatened to seal the planet in a white tomb. In time, more arrivals poured into Hearth, lured by the questionable promise of heat. Some carried scars from old disasters. Others stared hollow-eyed from the fresh hell of a trek across frozen terrain. Refugees were forcibly funneled into organized labor, as the settlement, though fragile, was at least more structured than scattered camps in the wastelands. Part of me was appalled at how quickly a new hierarchy sprung into existence. The settlement's self-appointed council put strict rules on who got the best spots near vented heat chambers. Medical professionals, engineers, and those with skills deemed critical to survival lived closer to the lava flow. Meanwhile, laborers slept in dimmer corridors, half frozen at night, forced to share meager space with rodents and the bustle of desperate crowds. Everyone clamored for fair treatment, But we all knew fairness was a luxury we could no longer afford. By the time I turned 17, I was already a veteran of this oppressive new world. The only constants were the trembling ground, the acrid scent of sulfur, and the strict rationing of everything: water, electricity, and hope. Our settlement had begun fortifying itself with walls made from volcanic rock, shaping them into tall barricades to keep out the roaming gangs that preyed on travelers. Some called these outsiders the cold-broken, exiles who hadn't found space in any settlement and now drifted like ghosts across the frozen plains, scavenging what they could. The council spun lurid tales of cannibalism and violence among them to justify harsher security measures. As I patrolled the settlement perimeter with a scrap metal spear, I wondered how much of it was true and how much was propaganda. We had all become heat-seekers in a sense, drawn magnetically to the hot rock that pulsed at our settlement's core. We told ourselves that as long as the earth still had these vents of molten persistence, there was a chance for life. But trouble simmered. The scientists among us, huddling in makeshift labs, refused to give reassuring speeches. Instead, they muttered anxious comments that the lava flows were growing unstable. The planet's interior was cooling faster than predicted, diminishing the pressure that fueled magma up through the crust. If the flows receded, it wasn't just our settlement at risk. Every cluster of survivors perched around active volcanoes would be left in darkness and fatal cold. Our watchers also reported that in some areas entire volcanoes had simply died out, no longer erupting, replaced by silent mountains of frozen rock. Rumblings of a final apocalypse drifted through bunkers like a half-formed nightmare. I remember the day a small team of geologists arrived from another settlement. They brought with them seismic data, chip drives, and starved expressions. Our council welcomed them with guarded courtesy, suspicious of anyone bringing distressing news. One geologist, a wiry woman named Tara, was particularly insistent that we relocate deeper underground. Her data suggested that the remaining heat was more reliable beneath Earth's crust. "We might salvage geothermals," she said, eyes wide with urgency. "If we drill deeper, we can eke out heat for decades. On the surface, we're doomed if the lava stops flowing." But the council, already overstretched with defending the settlement's perimeter, refused to sanction the op. "People can't just vanish into some hole in the ground," the council leader snapped. "We must secure what we have here first." As the geologists left rebuffed, disappointed, Tara pulled me aside. She had noticed my father speaking with a few open-minded council advisors. Quietly, she handed me a battered notebook stuffed with sketches and readings. "Share this with anyone who'll listen," she whispered. "We won't survive without deeper wells. Tell your father he needs to push for it." From inside, her fingers trembled with cold as she placed the book in my hands. That was the last I saw of Tara for many weeks. I spent half the night poring over her notes, trying to decipher the lines and equations that pointed to subterranean sources of heat. It was advanced science and I only grasped fragments. But her urgency was clear. We were perched on a ticking clock. A few months later, the settlement's outer channels froze solid for the first time, forging a thick crust of ice on the once hissing vents. Our welders worked frantically to thaw them and restore steam flow to the living quarters. But the updraft of molten rock beneath had thinned, leaving perhaps a fraction of the original force. The council had no choice but to finally consider the plan to go deep. A drilling operation was formed, led by my father and a small group of volunteer engineers. They used Tara's data, constructing heavy-duty rigs from scavenged car engines and repurposed piping. The entire settlement buzzed with a blend of hope and desperation. If we could reach down far enough without unleashing lethal volcanic instability, it might save us. I ventured into the half-finished drill site to observe. The corridor was hot, lit by flickering lamps and the faint glow of the inner magma flow. Sweat clung to my face despite the sub-zero world a few steps away. The rig was an ugly beast, all mismatched parts, thick tubing and rattling engine blocks. Nearby, my father stood over an array of monitors, each one crackling with lines of data. Now, in his 50s, he'd grown gaunt. His eyes were set with intense focus, cradling the same old accountant's meticulous attention to detail. I stepped up to him, my boots clicking on the basalt floor. "How is it looking?" I asked. He gestured to the screens. "We'll find out soon enough," he said quietly, "once we're through the upper crust. Pray it doesn't trigger an eruption." His voice held a shaky blend of excitement and dread. After 3 days of drilling, the rig struck a massive geothermal pocket. A colossal hiss reverberated through the corridors as scalding vapor burst forth. I vividly recall the way people cheered and whooped despite the immediate risk of a blowout. Steam rushed in dense clouds, carrying with it a surge of precious heat. The initial wave nearly overwhelmed the settlement's pressure valves, sending us scrambling to seal ventilation shafts and redirect the flow. But we adapted quickly. Even the council members joined in sealing off peripheral chambers. For the first time in years, I dared to believe we might have found a sustainable solution. That night, people held a makeshift feast, devouring leftover food rations they'd been hoarding. Laughter echoed in the basalt hallways, a jarring sound in a world that often felt like a perpetual funeral procession. But the next morning I woke to an ominous trembling beneath my cot. Something was shifting below us, an unsteady rumbling that unsettled the entire settlement. My father and the engineers inspected the rig and discovered an expanding seam in the rock. The new pressure had disrupted tectonic stability, creating a fault line that trailed dangerously close to the settlement's foundations. If it widened, entire sections of hearth could collapse into a lava tube. Panicked families rushed to tear down their homes and relocate further from the perimeter of the new fault. The council pleaded for calm, but rumors of an imminent sinkhole or volcanic eruption spread with uncontrollable speed. In that frenzy, I discovered the darker side of hope. The more we believed in salvation, the more we feared losing it. Adding to our woes, a band of cold-broken decided that our newly tapped heat vent was worth raiding. They approached the settlement under the cover of swirling snow, using the bone-white drifts as camouflage. The council had assigned me to a distant watchtower made of iron scaffolding wrapped in pressurized foam insulation. From that vantage point, I saw them, maybe 24 figures, ragged silhouettes silently crossing the ice, armed with battered rifles and crude spears. I sounded the alarm and makeshift sirens wailed. Soon the settlement bristled with defenders, many of whom had never fought a real battle. Within minutes, the outer wall erupted in a volley of gunfire and clashing metal. Geysers of steam hissed from the ground where bullets pierced vents, creating a fog that swallowed both friend and foe. Chaos reigned amid the swirling vapor. I remember stumbling through the haze, heart pounding, spear clutched in sweaty hands. 2 cold-broken emerged like wraiths, dragging an unconscious watchman. They halted when they saw me. One lunged forward. I thrust wildly with my spear, feeling the impact against flesh. A shriek, a rush of heat, a flash of red in the steam. My ears rang from the blasts. The survivor retreated, leaving me shaking. I had taken a life, or something close to it, in the name of defending warmth. So this was how far we had descended, battling fellow humans over scalding air and volcanic rock. The horror clung to me as the raid dissolved in the face of the settlement's defenders. The cold-broken retreated, ghosting back into the white expanse, leaving behind several of their own. We lost people too good, hungry souls who just wanted a chance to live with warmth in their bodies. In the aftermath, tension within Hearth soared. Some demanded the immediate expulsion of all recent arrivals, blaming them for resource strain and security lapses. Others pushed for negotiations with the cold-broken, pointing out that more attacks were inevitable unless we found common ground. Council sessions grew heated. My father argued in favor of forging alliances, but the council leader dismissed him. "We can't feed everyone," they insisted. "We can't protect them if they turn hostile. We must keep Hearth safe or everything will collapse." Deep down, I couldn't blame them entirely. Our settlement was fragile, each new crisis exposing another weakness. Yet I sensed that shutting ourselves off wasn't the answer. It was Terra's return that galvanized us. Striding into Hearth amid bitter winds, she and her small band of geologists carried samples from deeper shafts in a region farther south. They had discovered an underground reservoir of hot fluids that might provide a longer-lasting energy source. But her findings came with a dire caveat. Drilling deeper would require specialized equipment and the cooperation of multiple settlements. Without it, the Earth's diminishing warmth would fail us in a matter of years at best. "We can survive if we unite," he explained during a tense meeting in front of the entire settlement. "But if we remain divided, clinging to these meager flows, we'll tear ourselves apart before the planet finishes the job." That evening, I knelt by a half-frozen vent, letting the faint warmth seep into my jacket. Fragments of the raid tormented me. What if we'd negotiated from the start? What if we offered the Cold-Broken a stake in the drilling initiative, forging alliances rather than drawing borders in ice? I confided my worries to my father, who listened gravely. After a moment, he said, "Survival can make demons of us when we're afraid, but we can choose another way." With that in mind, he and a few allies made an unofficial pact with Terra to gather a delegation of representatives who would travel to nearby volcano settlements, attempt to form a coalition, and share resources for deeper drilling. Rumors turned to excitement, then anxiety, as word spread. The journey would be perilous. Cross the frozen surface too slowly and you risked freezing. Move too quickly and you might miss safe passage over volatile ice fields. Nonetheless, a small group assembled, engineers, envoys, and a handful of armed escorts, myself among them. The council leader offered reluctant support, likely hoping we would fail fast or find success they could claim credit for later. We departed at dawn, forging across a sweeping plain of powdery, lifeless snow under a sky that glowed faintly with the reflection of the Earth's last flickers. The air stung our faces as we marched, guided by the promise of forging alliances and, somehow, a better future. Along the way, we encountered a smaller cluster of the Cold-Broken. Initially, weapons lifted in mutual threat, but Terra raised her hands, showing no hostility. My father and I followed suit. Slowly, a tense conversation began. We explained our mission, the plan to tap deeper geothermal pockets and sustain pockets of habitable zones. Their leader, a man with sunken cheeks and burning eyes, listened. In halting words, he revealed they were exhausted, hungry, desperate for an alternative to nomadic raids. He asked if we could accept them, or at least let them follow. A vote was taken among our group. Some were reluctant, but Terra insisted that bridging trust was the only road to survival. In the end, we agreed, and the Cold-Broken men and women joined our caravan, making for a haunting procession across the ice. We traveled on, encountering more hazards of the New World, fracturing glaciers that yawned into bottomless crevasses, storms so cold they turned breath into shards of ice. Yet each day, our band pulled together, sharing rations and pulling one another through drifts. What once would have been unthinkable, a ragtag fellowship of settlement dwellers and vagrant outcasts, became the new standard for building tomorrow. As we neared the next volcanic settlement, I could feel the tension crackle. Would they open their walls to us? Would they share the dream of building a deeper network of geothermal wells? Or would fear overshadow hope? The last time we'd marched into a strange settlement, we had arrived as children with nothing but tears frozen to our faces. At last we reached the settlement, a fortress of basalt spires, perched precariously on a shelf of obsidian that led down to glowing magma pools. Gates of welded steel rose before us. Guards sized us up with the same wary suspicion we'd once shown travelers. Terra stepped forward, battered notes in hand, and told her story, ending with an appeal for unity. There was a long silence. Our hearts pounded until the guard whistles signaled the gates to open. Their council, clad in protective gear, listened intently. Though not entirely trusting, they admitted they were nearing crisis as well. If we combined our knowledge, our resources, perhaps we could drill deeper while making flexible alliances. A spark of hope took root. Now my days are spent in endless coordination, back and forth communication streams between Hearth and the Basalt Fortress, new caravans forging routes to a third and fourth settlement, rumored to have equipment we need. The daily quake beneath our feet is a reminder we're living on borrowed time, the planet gradually losing its lifeblood. In those trembling moments, we remain painfully aware that survival demands cooperation stronger than the divide that once separated us. People whisper that we're building a new era from these lava-scorched refuges, that maybe this is how civilization rises from the ashes, by acknowledging our interdependence. I would be lying if I said I don't fear for the future. We stand on the rim of an active world, with the fate of humanity resting on delicate pacts and even more delicate tectonics. Yet in the glow of molten rock, flickering through basalt corridors, I see new bonds formed every day between those who once fought each other for scraps. Families, once separated, reunite in the settlement squares. Engineers and geologists work side by side, forging designs for deeper wells. Children learn to read data charts alongside the old stories of what Earth once was. We have chosen to hope. And if the day comes when the last bit of heat surrenders to the void, at least we will face that ending together, forging warmth in each other's company. One evening, returning to my quarters, I catch sight of an orange-red glow in the distance, the ever-churning lava flow. My father stands nearby, gazing at it with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "Do you ever think about what's next?" I ask him. He doesn't look away from the molten tide when he answers. "Sometimes I dream we'll find a way to reignite the Earth's core." He smiles wryly. "Science fiction, right?" I nod, letting the dream hang in the warm, steaming air around us. Whether the Earth's core will ever be revived or not, the deeper miracle might be what it's done to us. Forced us out of our silos, forging unity in the crucible of desperation. Amid the swirling steam and the shifting rock, I realize that tomorrow is not guaranteed. The planet may continue to cool until these last vents sputter out. But if we have learned anything, it's that humanity's endurance doesn't rely on luxurious comfort or perpetual summer. It rests on our willingness to unite and adapt in the face of colossal odds. Here, amidst the heat that remains, we choose to keep going. We will burrow deeper, share resources, and carry on. Our footsteps echo in hardened lava corridors, the final strongholds of warmth on a dying Earth. Even if this world's heartbeat is slowing, we won't let it go quietly. We'll cling to every ember, forging new alliances by the glow of magma, doing everything we can to keep the flame alive.